Real true education, not fake news. It's the 18th of March and all the St. Patrick's Day ceremonies are over. It was wettish yesterday, but still good enough. And a good time was had by all. And we have a good fine day today. Now, I'm going to deal now with hate speech, folks. I'm asked to do it and I want to be objective about it. I hope you find it interesting. But if you read the hate speech bill, you'll find that there's an article in it about this EU directive. Now you can take a note of it there, 208-909 stroke JHA, 208 stroke 909 stroke JHA. So it's called the Council Framework Decision, a decision they made, a framework, of November 2008 on the application of the principle of mutual recognition of judgments in criminal matters. Now, all I have to say here is that the EU wants there to be common judgments for criminal matters. So a criminal matter is like burglary of a house or violent assault or something. A civil matter is where you owe money to somebody or they take you on a planning case or something like that. And the only criminal aspect to planning is if you actually break the rules so bad and build something without permission, they can come after you. And in that case, you could be sentenced to imprisonment for refusing to take it down or whatever. Anyway, what this does is, I wouldn't have a big issue. It means that if somebody is convicted of an offence in Spain, the Irish courts can implement that warrant and judgment here in Ireland. We needn't to go into it. But key to it is the list of convictions, the list of crimes. So the framework says on the application of the principle, that'd be Spain in the case I've just given you, of mutual recognition to judgments in criminal matters imposing custodial, that's prison, sentences, or measures involving deprivation of liberty, that'd be taking your liberty, for the purposes of their enforcement of the European Union, in the EU Union. So that's it, that's been the law. I'm not going to get any mileage out of that if I go into that in big detail, but what I want to go through is some of the types of offences. Participation in a criminal organisation, terrorism, trafficking in human beings, sexual exploitation of children and child pornography, illicit trafficking in narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances, illicit trafficking in weapons, munitions and explosives, corruption, fraud including affecting financial interests of the European communities within the meaning of the Convention of 1995 on the protection of European communities' financial interests, laundering the proceeds of crime, counterfeiting currencies, computer-related crime, that's very wide, environmental crime including illicit trafficking in endangered species and endangered plants and varieties, facilitating of unauthorised entry and residence. So there's one now, facilitation of unauthorised entry and residence. Isn't the government doing that with all the migrants? Murder, grievous bodily harm, illicit trade in human organs, kidnapping, illegal restraint and hostage taken. Now this is the one, racism and xenophobia. Racism and xenophobia. And then it goes on, organised armed robbery, swindling. I never thought there was such an offence as swindling. Look at swindling. I want to give these fellows the Ponzi scheme men. Anyway, illicit trafficking in nuclear and radioactive materials. So most of those are things we wouldn't have a problem with at all. But the thing is that they're very broad. There's probably tighter legislation to define them better. But the thing about it is racism and xenophobia, okay, is one. So we look at the computer definitions. Now, racism, we'll have a wider look at to see how we get this in, because I have a dislike of the Germans because they started 2 world wars and they got away with it and they killed a lot of people, and it's the Gaza people that has to take the abuse. It's not the Germans themselves. I said the Israeli state should have been set up in Germany, not in where it is. But anyway, that's one. So I also have a problem with Irish people, the Irish people who voted yes in the recent referendum. I'd like to know who they are and follow them up and confront them on the street, trying to take the mothers out of the family and trying to do away with the concept of marriage and all of that. I think that could be seen as a form of child abuse. So I'd like that followed up, but that's only my opinion. So we look further at racism, but I want to tell you what the xenophobia, a big word beginning with an X, you know, xenophobia. Uh, Xenophobia is a dislike, hatred, or fear of outsiders. It can manifest as a hostility towards immigrants, but it can also manifest as hatred towards members of another tribe, culture, or religion. The term xenophobia derives from the ancient Greek word xenos, meaning stranger. So it has an origin all right there in the Greek word xenos. And phobos, meaning fear. Xenophobia implies the perception that not only is it impossible for certain people designated as foreign to integrate in their own society, but also they pose a threat to, but also that they pose a threat to that society. Now I'll read that again. Xenophobia implies that the perception that not only is it impossible for certain people designated as foreign to integrate into one's society, that'd be a person coming from abroad to integrate into Irish society. Well, how would you integrate the man that beheaded two gay men in Sligo? How exactly would you integrate? How many heads would he cut off before he'd be integrated? I'd like that answer. Into one's own society, but also that they pose a threat to the integrity of that society. Well, I think there's evidence of that in England at the moment. I think there is. Now, you see, what I'm saying here is this is trying to legislate for something that is very, very difficult to legislate for, and that leaves people in fear to speak their mind. So I have that dealt with. Now, the reason I deal with this directive and this piece of legislation is that it's mentioned in the hate speech law. And because of that, folks, on 6 minutes, and I'll just refer you back to what it is. I like to keep my videos as short as possible. So if you hear of this in the hate speech law or any talk about it, it's the Council Framework Decision. It's an EU decision on the enforcement of orders from outside. It has nothing really to do with what's described. This is the Irish government that's bringing in the hate speech. But this is how they could enforce it. So, for example, if some Irishman went over to Italy and lived there and he made a hate speech over there, he could be brought back to Ireland. He could be sentenced there and brought back to Ireland here, and vice versa. That's all. I'm making very little comment on that, except just to know what it's about. The Council Framework Decision 208-909 JHA. You may hear it talked about on the radio. Now you know what it is. And this is part one of the hate speech, and we now stop and come back now to the hate speech bill itself. Thank you. Give a thumbs up or a thumbs down and ask any questions you wish.